depends on the specific type of group you have and the specific agenda. Okay, like the specific objectives. So I'm not the biggest fan of doing these things where the adrenaline is pumping and everything for the sake of that, right? If the goal is to build tighter relationships amongst the people who are there, so that those relationships, persevere, for example, afterwards. If somebody's having a personal um, um, adrenaline-filled moment, right? That's not intimately connected to relying on their teammates, for example, in a way that they can translate to a professional setting. Yeah, they can say, yes, so and so is going to prevent me from falling. Okay, but how often do you do that actually during the work? So, at one point that was like the fun thing. I think today it's more relegated to like high school leadership camps, okay, as opposed to corporate retreats. Um, I do think, though, the question of making time for people to have conversations in different venues and formats than they normally have is very important. So, for example, the dinner, which might go for 2 or 3 hours, right? And which allows people to have those longer conversations. And then you move around during the dinner so that other conversations can be had with other people. Activities like going for a hike, if people are able to walk, for example, is actually a very interesting one because you have great conversations while you're walking, right? Not just while you're eating, right? So I think that sometimes we forget about things that are perhaps even simpler. Sometimes it's an experiential thing. One retreat that I led, excuse me, had it was um, um, in the East Coast of the United States. Everybody went kayaking, and half the kayaking was with one person. It was all two-person kayaks, and half was with the other. We kayaking looking at dolphins. Never done that before. That was really cool. But along the way, there's all these conversations that happen. It wasn't, let's learn about all the different dolphins and the shrimp that they eat, or I don't know, whatever it happens to be, or but it's really more about the conversation and the relationship building, right? So I think it really depends. You know, a younger group that is a lot more physically active might, something that's a little bit more physically active might resonate and be more effective than, say, a team that is much, much, much older and a lot more static in terms of their lifestyle, right? So it really depends on what, right? And I think that that's what makes them also so interesting, particularly if you go to an area that might be different than what some of the people are part of. Did one, for example, where one person was from the area. And they decided, part of the thing was a guided tour. Okay, where that person was the tour guide, like a walking tour, and learned all about the history of the area, right? So there's so many different ways of doing it, but you can't be tick the box. We're going to do the kayak, wine tour, dinner, whatever it happens to be, right? You have to eat, so fine, that one's in there, but all the other ones are dependent.